What's going on, guys? It's AG here. It's a new month, which means it's time for another round of AG's picks. Today, we're going to be looking at some horror movies that you need to watch this month. All right, so before we get completely started here, do me a favor. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. If you are new here, make sure to subscribe down below. With that being said, let's get back on track. All right, so again, today we're going to be looking at some horror movies that you need to watch this month, this July. I've got a few different streaming services pulled up here, so we're going to take a look at that here in a second. I'm going to give you like a handful of movies that you need to watch on those services. I'm going to try to give you some more underseen ones, you know what I mean? So I'm not just giving you the obvious ones that you know of, but some that are maybe underseen. So that being said, let's go ahead and dive on in here. All right, so first up here, we're going to be looking at Netflix. Netflix has a pretty good variety here. I haven't rechecked Netflix in a while, but let's see what we can find on the horror genre. For starters here, Ouija Origin is a pretty good movie. The Ouija movies
Hello.
in general aren't bad. This one, I believe,
Who
is
are you
directed by
talking
Mike
to, Doris?
Flanagan, which did, I think it's directed by him. Let me check. Yeah, it is directed by Mike Flanagan. So he's the one that did Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor. If you've seen those, really good movies. He did this one. It's got a lot of that same cast from the Haunting of Hill House, like some of the little girls, the adults. So this is a really good movie. Actually, I really enjoyed this one. So Ouija, Origin of Evil, definitely a good movie to watch. Also, Ouija, the first one, it's not bad either. It's not as good as Ouija, Origin of Evil, but pretty good movie nonetheless. Then another horror movie here is Lights Out. So Lights Out is another one. It's directed by the guy that did the Shazam movies. I think his name is, let me double check here. Yeah, David Sandberg. So it's directed by the guy that did that, and this is a good movie. So Lights Out, basically, you kind of get the understanding from the premise of this movie, from the title. You know what I mean? So basically, when the lights are out, all bets are off. Like there ain't no telling what's going to go down. All right, so with those three out of the way, let's see what else we can find on here. Try to give you about five. So far, we got three. Anything else on here we're seeing? Okay, so here's one I just missed. Creep. It's actually a Netflix original, I believe. It's kind of it's a little weird, but basically this dude is a creep, is what the movie is, kind of where the title comes from. But basically, this guy invites this guy to come film his life, kind of for he's trying to like film something for his wife, I think is what he's trying to do. And so he brings this photographer off of whatever it is, Pinterest, somewhat not Pinterest. He puts an ad up basically and gets this guy to come film some stuff for him. And the guy that hired him ends up being pretty weird. And I'm not going to give you too many details here, but it's a pretty good movie. There's another one I saw earlier on here I'm going to try to get to. See if I can find it here. Oh, here we go. Here it is. Gerald's Game. So Gerald's Game is another Netflix original, and this is a Stephen King adaptation. Has some of the people from Haunting a Hill House, and it's directed by Mike Flanagan again. So if you can tell by now, I like Mike Flanagan. He's a good director in my opinion. He did, like I said, Haunting a Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor, and he also did Doctor Sleep. If you've seen that, the prequel to The Shining, he did that as well. So he's got some good stuff, and this one again has a lot of the cast from that. So those five movies are five movies I would watch on Netflix. So again, you got Gerald's Game, you've got Ouija, Ouija Origin of Evil, Creep, and Lights Out. Those are five that I would recommend watching on Netflix. All right, so let's go ahead and dive on over to Max, see what else we can find here. All right, so Max, in my opinion, is probably the best streaming service. It's got the best quality of movies, and there's a pretty big variety here. Let's see. I'm going to try to give y'all some that aren't too household names, but there'll probably be some household names in here. For starters here, Barbarian. Barbarian came out last year. Pretty underrated horror movie. Pretty good movie in general. It's weird. Like it's kind of a twist on. It's not what you expect. I'll say that. Like what you expect going in is not what you get here. It kind of takes a big 180 at the midway point of this movie. So the basic premise is these two people book the same Airbnb and they don't realize it. And basically they both end up there on the same night. And so they're trying to figure out, is this guy trustworthy? So the main girl is trying to figure out, is this guy trustworthy or is he a killer? So that's a pretty good one. Let's go back here. So Barbarian's a good one. I actually haven't seen Evil Dead Rise yet. That's probably the newest one on here. It's the big one. All right, so some other good ones here. We have Insidious and Insidious Chapter 2. Insidious is one of the better horror movies of recent memory. It's spawned a pretty big franchise. The newest one actually comes out this week, Insidious: The Red Door. So that wouldn't be a bad one to watch in preparation for this week's in preparation for Insidious: The Red Door. So Insidious is basically this kid is trapped in this other world, kind of like he's asleep. He's basically in a coma in the real world on Earth, but his mind is like trapped in this other reality. I think they call it the Further, I believe. And so they bring in some psychics, stuff like that, to try to get to the bottom of it. Pretty good movie. It's got Patrick Wilson in it. Pretty good movie. Malignant's another one that I haven't seen, but kind of caught my eye. It's directed by James Wan as well, who did like the Saw movie. All right, here's another one. Sinister. Sinister slept on movie. This is one of the best scary movies, really, of all time, in my opinion. It's got Ethan Hawke in it. Basically, he's a writer who writes books and basically goes and visits these haunted places unbeknownst to his family. Like, his family doesn't realize this house is haunted, but basically he moves into this house where this family was murdered. And once he gets there, he's trying to write the book, to figure out basically what happened here. And he comes across this set of tapes in the attic, and the tapes basically tell the tale of what really happened at this house. Pretty good scary movie. Hard to go wrong with Ethan Hawke, but Sinister is one of his better ones. All right, The Conjurings. It's hard to go wrong with those. Let's see what else we got here. All right, so The Witch is kind of an underseen one. It's got Anya Taylor-Joy in it. One of her first roles. It's set in like way back, like 1500s maybe. But basically, these people are out near a forest and their lambs kind of start disappearing, and they think that these witches might be in the forest kind of doing some voodoo on them. And long story short, this is a good movie. It's kind of different compared to the other movies. It's not my usual cup of tea when it comes to horror movies, but a pretty good one. All right, then last up here, we'll go with The Nun. The Nun is a Conjuring spinoff. It's a prequel to The Conjuring, and it wasn't quite as good as the Conjuring movies, but nonetheless, I actually enjoyed this movie. I enjoy this franchise as a whole, to be honest with you. If you haven't seen the Conjuring series, go watch it. But the nun is basically, in this Catholic church, and this nun and a priest go and try to figure out what's going on at this church. And pretty good, scary movie. Like I said, you can't really go wrong with any of the Conjuring series. All right, so let's go ahead and dive on over to Amazon Prime here. All right, so Prime usually has a pretty good variety here also. And then, you can buy movies on here too for pretty cheap if you want to watch one. But it's actually got a lot of newer horror movies. For example, Megan, I actually really like this movie. It's kind of a newer take on Chucky. I'm gonna get off the screen that way it doesn't copyright me. But it's a newer take on Chucky, and basically, this girl is a robot. The girl that's in the picture here, she's a robot, and basically, it's a horror movie. And yeah, it was a good movie. It was a pretty good movie. All right, then also here we got Nope's a good movie. I don't know if I'd call it a horror movie necessarily, but it's pretty good. The Black Phone came out last year with Ethan Hawke. I really didn't like this one as much as I thought I would. It was directed by the same guy as Sinister, and it's got Ethan Hawke, but I really didn't like it. All right, Jigsaw. Jigsaw actually wasn't bad here. I'm a big fan of the Saw franchise, and Jigsaw is basically the next movie in the Saw franchise. It's a pretty good movie. I really like I said, the Saw movies. Besides the first few, they're not great, but this one's probably the fourth best one in my opinion. Worth the watch. I guess maybe they don't got as much as I thought on Amazon Prime. I missed one. Here we go. Jeepers Creepers. Jeepers Creepers is a good movie. Jeepers Creepers, one of the better horror movies there is out there. It's pretty basic. Basically, his brother and sister come across this place where this guy in this truck is seen like dumping what they think might be bodies. And so they go in to investigate. And it takes a pretty big turn there, but Jeepers Creepers definitely worth the watch. I got one more on here I want to touch on before I go on over to Peacock. Where was it? Here we go. The Lazarus Effect. So the Lazarus Effect came out in like 2015. It's got Olivia Wilde in it. And there's not too much crazy going on here. It's not a great movie, but a solid horror movie nonetheless. Definitely worth the watch. All right, so let's go ahead and go on over to Peacock here. So I was going to dive into Hulu as well, but I'm having some login issues for some reason today. So we'll stick with just these that I've got pulled up. So Peacock usually has a pretty good variety here of horror movies. Let's see what we got here. I don't recognize any of these movies. These got to be some movies that I had when I worked at Family Video, because I don't recognize any of these movies. American Psycho I watched the other night. I don't know if I'd call it horror necessarily. It's a weird movie. I wouldn't watch it. I don't recognize any of these movies. What the heck? Okay, maybe I lied. Maybe I lied to you because I don't recognize any of these freaking movies. What on earth? This is like the dollar bin. What the heck is this stuff, man? Gotta be some horror movies on here worth watching, right? Ah, here we go. The Exorcist 3. So The Exorcist 3 is probably the best Exorcist sequel. The Exorcist is probably my favorite horror movie of all time. I'll just go ahead and tell you that. But this is really the only one worth watching, the only sequel worth watching, really. But The Exorcist 3 is, like I said, probably the best sequel. If you haven't seen The Exorcist 3, go check it out. I watched it last month, I think. Pretty good movie. And it still holds up, even though it came out in 1990. Still a pretty good watch. Let's see if we can find anything else here besides The Exorcist 3. So far, not a lot of luck on Peacock, huh? And I'm not lie to you, I'm not seeing anything good here. Holy crap. Here we go. All right. The Invisible Man. Good movie. Came out in 2020. It's got a 92 Rotten Tomatoes rating, apparently. Whew, that's pretty good. But yeah, I enjoyed this movie, The Invisible Man. Pretty basic concept. Yeah, this invisible person basically is messing with this girl, and there's some intense scenes here. Like she gets like choke slammed across the room, and basically nobody believes her because it's invisible. You know what I'm saying? Like, how are you going to believe somebody when someone invisible is taking your stuff? But The Invisible Man's definitely worth the watch. Jack Frost. What the hell? All right, so Knock at the Cabin came out this year. It's got Dave Bautista in it. It's another M. Night Shyamalan movie. Uh, Not a great movie by any means. The trailers were better than the movie, in my opinion. And this movie, kind of, you see what you see is what you get here. But it's a solid movie nonetheless. Like, it's worth the watch. Would I watch it again? Probably not. But out of the movies we've seen so far, you know what I'm saying? This is one of the better ones for sure. Knock at the Cabin. All right, you got Lazarus Effect again. We just talked about that on Prime. Mama. So I have not seen this movie, but it is on my list. So apparently it's directed by Andy Muschietti, who directed It Chapter 1. I actually might watch this after I'm done filming this video because this has been on my list. But it's got Jessica Chastain and the Kingslayer from Game of Thrones. I can't think of his actual name, but they're in this movie directed by Andy Muschietti, who, like I said, did It Chapter 1 and The Flash. It's kind of got my interest, so I'm going to probably check that out here in a little bit. But that might be one worth checking out if you haven't watched it. Can't say for sure because I haven't seen it, but looks interesting nonetheless. I haven't seen the Phantasm movies, but I've heard they're okay. Okay, so The Purge, kind of a horror movie, I guess. I wouldn't really call it a horror movie, but the first Purge has a very interesting premise. It didn't really live up to it by any means. Really one of the most wasted potential movies I've ever seen with the premise. Like, it could have been one of the greats in my opinion. But The Purge is basically one night out of the year, no law is in effect. So basically, you can do whatever the heck you want. And so basically, it's just this family trying to prevent people from coming in and murdering them. Basically, pretty interesting concept for sure. I don't know if I'd classify it as horror necessarily, but there we go. Sharknado. I don't know if that's a horror movie, but Sharknado is interesting. That's for sure. Sleepaway Camp. I've heard of this one. I haven't seen it though. Apparently, it's got a twist. Terrifier 2. I haven't seen that one either. Peacock kind of slacking. I didn't really see much here. All right, didn't see much on Peacock, so I've got 2 more here. Like I said, we're going to do Hulu, but for some reason I'm having login issues, of course, the day I'm trying to film this. So let's go ahead and dive on over to Paramount Plus, which a lot of people might not have Paramount Plus, but I do. So if you have Walmart Plus for some reason, you do have Paramount Plus, so just so you know. All right, so Paramount Plus actually has some better horror movies because let's see, we've already got some Scream ones. So let's see what we can find besides Scream. It looks like there's a lot of movies on here that are attached to Showtime. We're going to go over to Showtime after this, but let's see what we can find that's on actually Paramount Plus. Apparently, these two are merging at the end of the year, Paramount Plus and Showtime, so that'll be kind of interesting. Let's see here. Interview with the Vampire. That's a good movie. I don't know if it's not too much horror, but a great movie nonetheless. Looks like all these are on Showtime. But for those that aren't on Showtime, let's go ahead and look at these first. So, like I said, Interview with the Vampire, good movie. I don't know if it's necessarily a horror movie, but good movie. Pet Cemetery. Pet Cemetery is a great movie. Stephen King adaptation, one of the classics. The Ring, pretty good movie. The Ring is actually one of the better ones. One of the better horror movies. You got the whole Scream franchise. You can't really go wrong with those. The first one's the best one by far, but these last two have actually been really good. Scream 5 and Scream 6, I think what they are. But this one right here that I've got my mouse on, and this one over here, two quality horror movies for sure. All right, so it looks like the rest are going to be on Showtime. So let's go on over to Showtime real quick and see what we can do. And it also, I've read that Showtime's doing a free trial right now with Paramount Plus, I think, because like I said, they're kind of merging. So maybe Paramount Plus is doing the free trial. But if you see up here at the top of my screen, it says 30 days free. So they are doing some type of trial. So if you're interested in that. But anyway, so this is Showtime. From the look of Paramount Plus, it looked like they had some good ones on here, but let's see what we can find. Okay, so It Comes at Night, a pretty basic horror movie, but a pretty good one. I actually really enjoyed this movie. One that's been on my radar is Lamb. I haven't watched it yet, but it looks really interesting. Watch the trailer for Lamb. Pretty interesting concept that I'm probably going to. I've got Mama and Lamb. Those are like my next two movies I need to watch. I don't know which one I'm going to watch first, but definitely look interesting nonetheless. Minority Report's a great movie. I don't know if I'd call it. It's not horror, though, in my opinion. Misery. So Misery is another Stephen King movie. Came out in 1990. It's got Kathy Bates and James Caan in it. Really good movie. So basically, James Caan is a writer and author, and he gets injured in this car wreck, and Kathy Bates takes care of him. But Kathy Bates is a little psycho, and yeah, basically he's stuck there with her. Let's just say that. Pearl. I haven't checked these out, but I've heard they're not bad. But they kind of look a little not my cup of tea type of movie, you know. All right, so The Shining. Shining, one of my top two horror movies of all time. That and The Exorcist are neck and neck. 1980 Stephen King adaptation, Jack Nicholson, one of the greats. Hard to go wrong with The Shining. If you have not seen The Shining, go watch it right now, please. Snowpiercer, I haven't seen. I don't think it's really a horror movie. Source Code's not horror. Super 8, it's not really a horror movie, but this is a good movie. It kind of makes me think of Stranger Things. It's that kind of feel. Super 8's a really good movie. It's directed by J.J. Abrams, and this actually reminds me of another movie I watched recently called Summer of '84, which is really a horror movie. Super 8, not so much, but Summer of '84, if you have not watched it, go look it up and watch it, please. It's not really on anything. I had to buy it on Amazon Prime, but Summer of '84, it's got the Stranger Things vibes with the kids in the 80s, but it meets Disturbia. So with Shia LaBeouf, where he thinks the murderer next door he thinks the person next door is a murderer. It's basically those movies combined, and oof, great movie. They had the Friday the 13th franchise on here earlier, but I guess they took it off. Those are my horror movies that I think you should watch this month. If I missed any, let me know in the comments section some horror movies that you can stream this month, or some horror movies that you would recommend that aren't on any streaming services. Because there are a lot of horror movies out there that I missed, obviously, that aren't on streaming services that I would recommend. But these aren't necessarily the best horror movies of all time. Some of them are. But just horror movies that I think you should watch this month. But let me know, like I said in the comments, any that you think people should watch. And like I said earlier, if you enjoyed what you saw here, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that big subscribe button down below for me. We're almost to 1,000. We're slowly getting there. With that being said, until next time, AG out.